Chapter 70 Food Meals. Chapter 1 Eat of the lawful things that we have provided you with. Narrated Abu Musa al-Ashari. The Prophet said, "Give food to the hungry, pay a visit to the sick, and release, set free the one in captivity by paying his ransom." Narrated Abu Huraira. The family of Muhammad did not eat their fill for 3 successive days till he died. Narrated Abu Huraira. Once, while I was in a state of fatigue because of severe hunger, I met Umar bin al-Khattab, so I asked him to recite a verse from Allah's book to me. He entered his house and interpreted it to me. Then I went out, and after walking for a short distance, I fell on my face because of fatigue and severe hunger. Suddenly, I saw Allah's apostle standing by my head. He said, "O Abu Huraira." I replied, "Labaik, O Allah's messenger," and "Sadaik." Then he held me by the hand and made me get up. Then he came to know what I was suffering from. He took me to his house and ordered a big bowl of milk for me. I drank thereof, and he said, "Drink more, O Abu Hir." So I drank again, whereupon he again said, "Drink more." So I drank more till my belly became full and looked like a bowl. Afterwards I met Umar and mentioned to him what had happened to me, and said to him, "Somebody who had more right than you, O Umar, took over the case. By Allah, I asked you to recite a verse to me, while I knew it better than you." On that Umar said to me, "By Allah, if I admitted and entertained you, it would have been dearer to me than having nice red camels." Chapter 2 Mention the name of Allah on starting to eat, and eat with the right hand. Narrated Umar bin Abi Salama. I was a boy under the care of Allah's messenger, and my hand used to go around the dish while I was eating. So Allah's messenger said to me, "O boy, mention the name of Allah and eat with your right hand, and eat of the dish what is nearer to you." Since then I have applied those instructions when eating. Chapter 3 To eat of the dish what is nearer to you. Narrated Umar bin al-Salama, who was the son of Salama, the wife of the Prophet. Once I ate a meal with Allah's messenger, and I was eating from all sides of the dish. So Allah's messenger said to me, "Eat of the dish what is nearer to you." Narrated Wab bin Kaysan, Abi Nuaym. A meal was brought to Allah's messenger, while his stepson Umar bin Abi Salama was with him. Allah's messenger said to him, "Mention the name of Allah and eat of the dish what is nearer to you." Chapter 4 Eating from around the dish while taking meal with someone else. Narrated Anas bin Malik. A tailor invited Allah's messenger to a meal which he had prepared. I went along with Allah's messenger and saw him seeking to eat the pieces of gourd from the various sides of the dish. Since that day I have liked to eat gourd. Umar bin Abi Salama said, "The Prophet said to me, eat with your right hand." Chapter 6 To eat with right hand and to start with the right side in doing other things. Narrated Aisha. The Prophet used to love to start doing things from the right side whenever possible, in performing ablution, putting on his shoes, and combing his hair. Al-Ashad said, "The Prophet used to do so in all his affairs." Chapter 6. Whoever ate till he was satisfied. Narrated Anas bin Malik. Abu Talha said to Sulaym, I have heard the voice of Allah's messenger, which was feeble, and I think that he is hungry. Have you got something to eat? She took out some loaves of barley bread, then took her face covering sheet and wrapped the bread in part of it, and pushed it under my garment, and turned the rest of it around my body and sent me to Allah's messenger. I went with that and found Allah's messenger in the mosque with some people. I stood up near them, and Allah's messenger asked me, Have you been sent by Abu Talha? I said, Yes. He asked, With some food for us? I said, Yes. Then Allah's messenger said to all those who were with him, Get up. He set out, and all the people accompanied him. And I proceeded ahead of them till I came to Abu Talha. Abu Talha then said, O Sulaym, Allah's messenger has arrived along with the people, and we do not have food enough to feed them all. She said, Allah and his apostle know better. So Abu Talha went out till he met Allah's messenger. Then Abu Talha and Allah's messenger came and entered the house. Allah's apostle said, Sulaym, bring whatever you have. She brought that very bread. The Prophet ordered that it be crushed into small pieces, and Sulaym pressed a skin of butter on it. Then Allah's apostle said whatever Allah wished him to say to bless the food, and then added, Admit 10 men. So they were admitted, ate their fill, and went out. The Prophet then said, Admit 10 more. They were admitted, ate their fill, and went out. He then again said, Admit 10 more. They were admitted, ate their fill, and went out. He admitted 10 more, and so all those people ate their fill, and they were 80 men. Narrated Abdur Rahman bin Abu Bakr. We were 130 men sitting with the Prophet. The Prophet said, Have any one of you any food with him? It happened that one man had 1 saw of wheat flour or so, which was turned into dough then. After a while, a tall, lanky pagan came driving some sheep. The Prophet asked, Will you sell us a sheep, or give it to us as a gift? The pagan said, No, but I will sell it. So the Prophet bought from him a sheep, which was slaughtered, and then the Prophet ordered that the liver, the kidneys, lungs and heart, etc. of that sheep be roasted. By Allah, none of those 130 men but had his share of those things. The Prophet gave to those who were present, and also kept a share for those who were absent. He then served that cooked sheep in 2 big trays, and we all ate together our fill. Yet there remained a part of it in those 2 trays which I carried on the camel. Narrated Aisha. The Prophet died when we had satisfied our hunger with the 2 black things, dates and water. Chapter 7. There is no restriction on the blind. Narrated Suwaid bin Nu'man. We went out with Allah's messenger to Khaybar, and when we were at As-Saba, Yahya, a sub-narrator, said, As-Saba is a place at a distance of 1 day's journey to Khaybar. Allah's messenger asked the people to bring their food, but there was nothing with the people except Sawik, so we all chewed and ate of it. Then the Prophet asked for some water, and he rinsed his mouth, and we too rinsed our mouths. Then he led us in the Maghrib prayer without performing ablution again. Chapter 8. thin bread and eating at a dining table. Narrated Qatada. We were in the company of Anas, whose baker was with him. Anas said, the Prophet did not eat thin bread or a roasted sheep till he met Allah, died. Narrated Anas. To the best of my knowledge, the Prophet did not take his meals in a big tray at all, nor did he ever eat well-baked thin bread, nor did he ever eat at a dining table. Narrated Anas. The Prophet halted to consummate his marriage with Safiya. I invited the Muslims to his wedding banquet. He ordered that a leather dining sheet be spread, then dates, dried yogurt and butter were put on those sheets. Anas added, the Prophet consummated his marriage with Safiya during a journey, whereupon Hais' sweet dish was served on a leather dining sheet. Narrated Wahb bin Kaysan. The people of Sham taunted Abdullah bin As-Zubayr by calling him the son of Datin Natakain, the woman who has 2 waist belts. His mother Asma said to him, O my son, they taunt you with Natakain. Do you know what the Natakain were? That was my waist belt, which I divided in 2 parts. I tied the water skin of Allah's messenger with one part, and with the other part I tied his food container. Narrated Ibn Abbas. That is Aunt Hufayd bint Al-Harith bin Hassan presented to the Prophet butter, dried yogurt and mastigers. The Prophet invited the people to those mastigers, and they were eaten on his dining sheet, but the Prophet did not eat of it, as if he disliked it. Nevertheless, if it was unlawful to eat that, the people would not have eaten it on the dining sheet of the Prophet, nor would he have ordered that they be eaten. Chapter 9. As-Sawik. Narrated Suwaid bin An-Numan. That while they were with the Prophet at As-Saba, which was at a distance of 1 day's journey from Khaybar, the prayer became due, and the Prophet asked the people for food, but there was nothing with the people except Sawik. He ate of it, and we ate along with him. And then he asked for water and rinsed his mouth with it, and then he offered the Maghrib prayer, and we too offered a prayer, but the Prophet did not perform ablution again after eating the Sawik. Chapter 10. The Prophet Sas never used to eat anything unless it was named for him, so that he might know what it was. Narrated Khalid bin al-Walid. That he went with Allah's messenger to the house of Maimuna, who was his and Ibn Abbas' aunt. He found with her a roasted mastiger, which her sister Hufayda bint al-Harith had brought from Najd. Maimuna presented the mastiger before Allah's messenger, who rarely started eating any unfamiliar food before it was described and named for him. But that time Allah's messenger stretched his hand towards the meat of the mastiger, whereupon a lady from among those who were present said, You should inform Allah's messenger of what you have presented to him. O Allah's messenger, it is the meat of a mastiger. On learning that, Allah's messenger withdrew his hand from the meat of the mastiger. Khalid bin al-Walid said, O Allah's messenger, is this unlawful to eat? Allah's messenger replied, No, but it is not found in the land of my people, so I do not like it. Khalid said, Then I pulled the mastiger meat towards me and ate it while Allah's messenger was looking at me. Chapter 11. The food of one person is sufficient for 2 persons. Narrated Abu Huraira. Allah's messenger said, The food for 2 persons is sufficient for 3, and the food of 3 persons is sufficient for 4 persons. Chapter 12. A believer eats in one intestine. Narrated Nafi. Ibn Umar never used to take his meal unless a poor man was called to eat with him. One day I brought a poor man to eat with him. The man ate too much, whereupon Ibn Umar said, "O Nafi, don't let this man enter my house, for I heard the Prophet saying, a believer eats in one intestine is satisfied with a little food, and a kafir, unbeliever, eats in 7 intestines, eats much food." Narrated Ibn Umar. Allah's Messenger said, "A believer eats in one intestine, is satisfied with a little food, and the kafir, unbeliever, or a hypocrite, eats in 7 intestines, eats too much." Narrated Amr. Abu Nahik was a avaricious eater. Ibn Umar said to him, Allah's Messenger said, "A kafir unbeliever eats in 7 intestines, eats much." On that Abu Nahik said, "But I believe in Allah and His Apostle." Narrated Abu Huraira. Allah's Messenger said, "A Muslim eats in 1 intestine. He is satisfied with a little food, while a kafir unbeliever eats in 7 intestines, eats much." Narrated Abu Huraira. A man used to eat much, but when he embraced Islam he started eating less. That was mentioned to the Prophet, who then said, "A believer eats in 1 intestine, is satisfied with a little food, and a kafir eats in 7 intestines, eats much." Chapter 13. To eat while leaning. Narrated Abu Juhayfa. Allah's Messenger said, "I do not take my meals while leaning against something." Narrated Abu Juhayfa. While I was with the Prophet, he said to a man who was with him, "I do not take my meals while leaning." Chapter 14. Roasted meat. Narrated Khalid bin al-Walid. A roasted mastigur was brought to the Prophet, who stretched his hand towards it to eat it, but it was said to him, "It is a mastigur," so he withdrew his hand. Khalid asked, "Is it unlawful to eat?" The Prophet said, "No, but it is not found in the land of my people, and that is why I do not like eating it." So Khalid started eating it while Allah's Messenger was looking at him. An-Nadir said, "Al-Qasira is prepared from bran, while Al-Harira is prepared from milk." Chapter 15. Al-Qasira, dish prepared with wild flour and fat. Narrated Urban bin Malik, who attended the Badr battle and was from the Ansar, that he came to the Prophet and said, "O Allah's Apostle, I have lost my eyesight and I lead my people in the prayer as an imam. When it rains, the valley which is between me and my people flows with water, and then I cannot go to their mosque to lead them in the prayer. O Allah's Messenger, I wish that you could come and pray in my house, so that I may take it as a praying place." The Prophet said, "Allah willing, I will do that." The next morning, soon after the sun had risen, Allah's Messenger came with Abu Bakr. The Prophet asked for the permission to enter, and I admitted him. The Prophet had not sat till he had entered the house and said to me, "Where do you like me to pray in your house?" I pointed at a place in my house, whereupon he stood and said, "Allahu Akbar." We aligned behind him, and he prayed 2 rakat and finished it with taslim. We then requested him to stay for a special meal of kasira, which we had prepared. A large number of men from adjoining area gathered in the house. One of them said, "Where is Malik bin Ad-Dukshin?" Another man said, "He is a hypocrite and does not love Allah and His Apostle." The Prophet said, "Do not say so. Do you not think that he has said, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, seeking Allah's pleasure? The man said, Allah and his apostle know better, but we have always seen him mixing with hypocrites and giving them advice. The Prophet said, Allah has forbidden the hell fire for those who testify that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, seeking Allah's pleasure. Chapter 16. Al-Akit, dried yogurt. Narrated Ibn Abbas. My aunt presented roasted mastigers, LGT, and milk to the Prophet. The mastigers were put on his dining sheet, and if it was unlawful to eat, it would not have been put there. The Prophet drank the milk and ate the LQT only. Chapter 17. As-salk, a kind of beef and barley. Beet. Narrated Sal bin Saad. We used to be happy on Fridays, for there was an old lady who used to pull out the roots of silk and put it in a cooking pot with some barley. When we had finished the prayer, we would visit her and she would present that dish before us. So we used to be happy on Fridays because of that, and we never used to take our meals or have a midday nap except after the Friday prayer. By Allah, that meal contained no fat. Chapter 18. To seize and catch flesh with the teeth while eating. Narrated Ibn Abbas. The Prophet ate of the meat of a shoulder by cutting the meat with his teeth, and then got up and offered a prayer without performing the ablution anew. Narrated Ibn Abbas. The Prophet took out a bone with meat on it from a cooking pot and ate of it, and then offered a prayer without performing ablution anew. Chapter 19. To eat the flesh of a foreleg by stripping the bone of its meat with the teeth. Narrated Abu Qatada. We went out towards Mecca with the Prophet. Narrated Abu Qatada. Once while I was sitting with the companions of the Prophet at a station on the road to Mecca, and Allah's Messenger was stationing ahead of us, and all the people were assuming Ihram while I was not. My companions saw an onager while I was busy mending my shoes. They did not inform me of the onager, but they wished that I would see it. Suddenly I looked and saw the onager. Then I headed towards my horse, saddled it and rode. But I forgot to take the lash and the spear. So I said to them, my companions, give me the lash and the spear. But they said, no, by Allah, we will not help you in any way to hunt it. I got angry, dismounted, took it the spear and the lash, rode the horse, chased the onager and wounded it. Then I brought it when it had died. My companions started eating of its cooked meat, but they suspected that it might be unlawful to eat of its meat while they were in a state of Ihram. Then I proceeded further, and I kept one of its forelegs with me. When we met Allah's Apostle, we asked him about that. He said, have you some of its meat with you? I gave him that foreleg, and he ate the meat till he stripped the bone of its flesh, although he was in a state of Ihram. Chapter 20. To cut the meat with a knife. Narrated Amr bin Umayyah. That he saw the Prophet holding a shoulder piece of mutton in his hand and cutting part of it with a knife. Then he was called for the prayer, whereupon he put down the shoulder piece and the knife with which he was cutting it, and then stood for prayer without performing ablution again. Chapter 21. The Prophet Sauce never criticized any food. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet never criticized any food he was invited to, but he used to eat if he liked the food, and leave it if he disliked it. Chapter 22. To blow barley to remove the husk. Narrated Abu Hasim that he asked Saul, Did you use white flour during the lifetime of the Prophet? Saul replied, No. Hasim asked, Did you use to sift barley flour? He said, No, but we used to blow off the husk of the barley. Chapter 23. What the Prophet Saus and his companions used to eat. Narrated Abu Huraira. Once the Prophet distributed dates among his companions and gave each one 7 dates. He gave me 7 dates too, one of which was dry and hard, but none of the other dates was more liked by me than that one, for it prolonged my chewing it. Narrated Saad. I was one of the first 7 who had embraced Islam with Allah's Messenger, and we had nothing to eat then, except the leaves of the Habala or Hubula tree, so that our stool used to be similar to that of sheep. Now the tribe of Bani Asad wants to teach me Islam. I would be a loser, and all my efforts will be in vain if I learned Islam anew from them. Narrated Abu Hasim. I asked Sahl bin Saad, Did Allah's Messenger ever eat white flour? Sahl said, Allah's Messenger never saw white flour since Allah sent him as an apostle till he took him unto him. I asked, Did the people have used sieves during the lifetime of Allah's Messenger? Sahl said, Allah's Messenger never saw used a sieve since Allah sent him as an apostle until he took him unto him. I said, How could you eat barley unsifted? He said, We used to grind it and then blow off its husk, and after the husk flew away, we used to prepare the dough, bake and eat it. Narrated Abu Huraira that he passed by a group of people in front of whom there was a roasted sheep. They invited him, but he refused to eat and said, Allah's Messenger left this world without satisfying his hunger, even with barley bread. Narrated Anas bin Malik. The Prophet never took his meals at a dining table, nor in small plates, and he never ate thin, well-baked bread. The sub-narrator asked Qatada, over what did they used to take their meals? Qatada said, on leather dining sheets. Narrated Aisha. The family of Muhammad had not eaten wheat bread to their satisfaction for 3 consecutive days since his arrival at Medina till he died. Chapter 24. At Talbina, a kind of dish prepared from flour or bran. Narrated Aisha. The wife of the Prophet, that whenever one of her relatives died, the woman assembled and then dispersed, returned to their houses, except her relatives and close friends. She would order that a pot of talbina be cooked, then tarid, a dish prepared from meat and bread, would be prepared and the talbina would be poured on it. Aisha would say to the woman, Eat of it, for I heard Allah's Messenger saying, the talbina soothes the heart of the patient and relieves him from some of his sadness. Chapter 25. At Tarid, a dish prepared from meat and bread. Narrated Abu Musa al-Ashari. The Prophet said, Many men reach perfection, but none among the women reached perfection except Mary, the daughter of Imran, and Aisha, Pharaoh's wife. And the superiority of Aisha to other women is like the superiority of tarid to other kinds of food. Narrated Anas. The Prophet said, the superiority of Aisha to other women is like the superiority of tarid to other kinds of food. Narrated Anas. I went along with the Prophet to the house of a young tailor of his. The tailor presented a dish of tarid to the Prophet and resumed his work. The Prophet started picking the pieces of gourd, and I too started picking them and putting it before him. Since then I have always loved to eat gourd. Chapter 26. A roasted sheep. Narrated Qatada. We used to visit Anas bin Malik while his baker was standing and baking. Anas would say, "Eat, I do not know that the Prophet had ever seen well-baked bread till he met Allah, nor had he ever seen a roasted sheep with his own eyes." Narrated Amr bin Umayyah ad-Damri. I saw Allah's messenger cutting part of the shoulder of mutton with a knife. He ate of it and then was called for prayer, whereupon he got up and put down the knife and offered a prayer without performing new ablution. Chapter 27. Storage of food in the houses and on a journey. Narrated Abis. I asked Aisha, did the Prophet forbid eating the meat of sacrifices offered on Eid ul-Adha for more than 3 days? She said, the Prophet did not do this except in the year when the people were hungry, so he wanted the rich to feed the poor. But later we used to store even a trotter of a sheep to eat it. 15 days later, she was asked, what compelled you to do so? She smiled and said, the family of Muhammad did not eat to their satisfaction white bread with meat soup for 3 successive days till he met Allah. Narrated Jabir. We used to carry the meat of the hadis, sacrificed animals, to Medina during the lifetime of the Prophet. Chapter 28. Al-Hais. Dish prepared from dried yogurt, butter and dates. Narrated Anas bin Malik. Allah's messenger said to Abu Talha, seek one of your boys to serve me. Abu Talha mounted me behind him on his riding animal and took me to the Prophet. So I used to serve Allah's messenger. Whenever he dismounted to stay somewhere, I used to hear him saying very often, O Allah, I seek refuge with you from having worries, sadness, helplessness, laziness, miserliness, cowardice, from being heavily in debt, and for being overpowered by other persons unjustly. I kept on serving till we returned from the battle of Khaybar. The Prophet then brought Safiya bint Huyay, whom he had won from the war booty. I saw him folding up a gown or a garment for her to sit on behind him on his she-camel. When he reached Asaba, he prepared hais and placed it on a dining sheet. Then he sent me to invite men, who came and ate, and that was his and Safiya's wedding banquet. Then the Prophet proceeded, and when he noticed the mountain of Uhud, he said, this mountain loves us and we love it. When we approached Medina, he said, O Allah, I make the area between its 2 mountains a sanctuary as Abraham has made Mecca a sanctuary. O Allah, bless their mud and saw special kinds of measure. Chapter 29. Eating in a dish decorated with silver. Narrated Abdur Rahman bin Abi Layla. We were sitting in the company of Hudayfa, who asked for water, and a Magian brought him water. But when he placed the cup in his hand, he threw it at him and said, "Had I not forbidden him to do so more than once or twice?" He wanted to say, "I would not have done so," adding, "But I heard the Prophet saying, 'Do not fear silk or dibaja, and do not drink in silver or golden vessels, and do not eat in plates of such metals, for such things are for the unbelievers in this worldly life, and for us in the hereafter." Chapter 30. The mention of food. Narrated Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Allah's Messenger said, "The example of a believer who recites the Quran is that of a citron, which smells good and tastes good, and the example of a believer who does not recite the Quran is that of a date which has no smell but tastes sweet. And the example of a hypocrite who recites the Quran is that of an aromatic plant which smells good but tastes bitter. And the example of a hypocrite who does not recite the Quran is that of a colocynth plant which has no smell and is bitter in taste." Narrated Anas. The Prophet said, "The superiority of Aisha to other ladies is like the superiority of tari to other kinds of food." Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "Traveling is a kind of torture, as it prevents one from sleeping and eating, so when one has finished his job, he should return quickly to his family." Chapter 31. Al-Udam, additional food taken with bread. Narrated Qasim bin Muhammad. 3 traditions have been established because of Barira. Aisha intended to buy her and set her free, but Barira's masters said, "Her wala will be for us." Aisha mentioned that to Allah's Messenger, who said, "You could accept their condition if you wished, for the wala is for the one who manumits the slave." Barira was manumitted. Then she was given a choice, either to stay with her husband or leave him. One day Allah's Messenger entered Aisha's house while there was a cooking pot of food boiling on the fire. The Prophet asked for lunch, and he was presented with bread and some extra food from the homemade udam, e.g. soup. He asked, "Don't I see meat being cooked?" They said, "Yes, O Allah's Apostle, but it is the meat that has been given to Barira in charity, and she has given it to us as a present." He said, "For Barira it is alms, but for us it is a present." Chapter 32. Sweet edible things and honey. Narrated Aisha. Allah's Messenger used to love sweet edible things and honey. Narrated Abu Huraira. I used to accompany Allah's Messenger to fill my stomach, and that was when I did not eat baked bread, nor wear silk. Neither a male nor a female slave used to serve me, and I used to bind stones over my belly and ask somebody to recite a Quranic verse for me, though I knew it, so that he might take me to his house and feed me. Jafar bin Abi Talib was very kind to the poor, and he used to take us and feed us with whatever was available in his house, and if nothing was available, he used to give us the empty honey or butter skin, which we would tear and lick whatever was in it. Chapter 33. Al-Duba Gourd. Narrated Anas. Allah's Messenger went to the house of his slave tailor, and he was offered a dish of gourd, of which he started eating. I have loved to eat gourd since I saw Allah's Messenger eating it. Chapter 34. To prepare a meal for Muslim brethren. Narrated Abu Masud al-Ansari. There was a man called Abu Shuaib, and he had a slave who was a butcher. He said to his slave, "Prepare a meal to which I may invite Allah's messenger, along with 4 other men." So he invited Allah's messenger and 4 other men. But another man followed them, whereupon the Prophet said, "You have invited me as one of 5 guests, but now another man has followed us. If you wish, you can admit him, and if you wish, you can refuse him." On that the host said, "But I admit him." Narrated Muhammad bin Ismail. If guests are sitting at a dining table, they do not have the right to carry food from other tables to theirs, but they can pass on food from their own table to each other, otherwise they should leave it. Chapter 35. Whoever invited a man to a meal and then went to carry on his job. Narrated Anas. I was a young boy when I once was walking with Allah's messenger. Allah's messenger entered the house of his slave tailor, and the latter brought a dish filled with food covered with pieces of gourd. Allah's apostle started picking and eating the gourd. When I saw that, I started collecting and placing the gourd before him. Then the slave returned to his work. Anas added, "I have kept on loving gourd since I saw Allah's messenger doing what he was doing." Chapter 36. Soup. Narrated Anas bin Malik. A tailor invited the Prophet to a meal which he had prepared, and I went along with the Prophet. The tailor presented barley bread and soup containing gourd and cured meat. I saw the Prophet picking the pieces of gourd from around the dish, and since then I have kept on liking gourd. Chapter 37. Cured meats. Narrated Anas. I saw the Prophet being served with soup and containing gourd and cured meat, and I saw him picking and eating the pieces of gourd. Narrated Aisha. The Prophet did not do that, he forbade the storage of the meat of sacrifices for 3 days, except he did so that the rich would feed the poor. But later we used to keep even trotters to cook. 15 days later, the family of Muhammad did not eat wheat bread with meat or soup to their satisfaction for 3 successive days. Chapter 38. To present something to their companion across the dining table. Narrated Anas bin Malik. A tailor invited Allah's messenger to a meal which he had prepared. I went with Allah's messenger to that meal. And the tailor served the Prophet with barley bread and soup of gourd and cured meat. I saw Allah's messenger picking the pieces of gourd from around the dish, and since then I have kept on liking gourd. Chapter 39. The eating of snake cucumber with fresh dates. Narrated Abdullah bin Jafar bin Abi Talib. I saw Allah's messenger eating fresh dates with snake cucumber. Chapter 40. Narrated Abu Uthman. I was a guest of Abu Huraira for 7 days. Abu Huraira, his wife, and his slave used to get up and remain awake for 1/3 of the night by turns. Each would offer the night prayer and then awaken the other. I heard Abu Huraira saying, Allah's messenger distributed dates among the companions, and my share was 7 dates, one of which was a hasafa, a date which dried on the tree before it was fully ripe. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet distributed dates among us, and my share was 5 dates. 4 of which were good, and 1 was a hasapha, and I found the hasapha the hardest for my teeth. Chapter 41. Fresh dates and dry dates. Chapter 42. The eating of aspadics of the palm tree. Aisha Ra said, when Allah's messenger died, we had been satisfied by the 2 black things, dates and water. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah. There was a Jew in Medina who used to lend me money up to the season of plucking dates. Jabir had a piece of land which was on the way to Ruma. That year the land was not promising, so the payment of the debt was delayed 1 year. The Jew came to me at the time of plucking, but gathered nothing from my land. I asked him to give me 1 year respites, but he refused. This news reached the Prophet, whereupon he said to his companions, let us go and ask the Jew for respite for Jabir. All of them came to me in my garden, and the Prophet started speaking to the Jew. But he, Jew, said, O Abu Qasim, I will not grant him respite. When the Prophet saw the Jew's attitude, he stood up and walked all around the garden and came again and talked to the Jew. But the Jew refused his request. I got up and brought some ripe fresh dates and put it in front of the Prophet. He ate and then said to me, where is your hut, O Jabir? I informed him, and he said, spread out a bed for me in it. I spread out a bed, and he entered and slept. When he woke up, I brought some dates to him again, and he ate of it, and then got up and talked to the Jew again. But the Jew again refused his request. Then the Prophet got up for a second time amidst the palm trees loaded with fresh dates, and said, O Jabir, pluck dates to repay your debt. The Jew remained with me while I was plucking the dates till I paid him all his right. Yet there remained extra quantity of dates, so I went out and proceeded till I reached the Prophet and informed him of the good news, whereupon he said, I testify that I am Allah's messenger. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar. While we were sitting with the Prophet, fresh dates were brought to him. The Prophet said, there is a tree among the trees which is as blessed as a Muslim. I thought that it was the date palm tree, and intended to say, it is the date palm tree, O Allah's messenger, but I looked behind to see that I was the 10th and youngest of 10 men present there, so I kept quiet. Then the Prophet said, it is the date palm tree. Chapter 43. Al-Ajwa, a special kind of date. Narrated Sad. Allah's messenger said, he who eats 7 ajwa dates every morning will not be affected by poison or magic on the day he eats them. Chapter 44. To eat 2 dates at a time. Narrated Jabala bin Suhaim. At the time of Ibn as-Zubayr, we were struck with famine, and he provided us with dates for our food. Abdullah bin Umar used to pass by us while we were eating and say, do not eat 2 dates together at a time, for the Prophet forbade the taking of 2 dates together at a time in a gathering. Ibn Umar used to add, unless one takes the permission of one's companions. Chapter 45. The snake cucumber. Narrated Abdullah bin Jafar. I saw the Prophet eating fresh dates with snake cucumbers. Chapter 46. The goodness of the date palm tree. Narrated Ibn Umar. The Prophet said, there is a tree among the trees which is similar to a Muslim in goodness, and that is the date palm tree. Chapter 47. The taking of two kinds of fruit or food at a time. Narrated Abdullah bin Jafar. I saw Allah's Messenger eating fresh dates with snake cucumbers. Chapter 48. Whoever admitted the guests in batches of 10 persons by turns. Narrated Anas. My mother Sulaym took a mud of barley grain, ground it and made porridge from it, and pressed over it a butter skin she had with her. Then she sent me to the Prophet, and I reached him while he was sitting with his companions. I invited him, whereupon he said, and those who are with me? I returned and said, yeah, he says, and those who are with you, and those who are with me. Abu Talha went out to him and said, O Allah's Messenger, it is just a meal prepared by Sulaym. The Prophet entered and the food was brought to him. He said, let 10 persons enter upon me. Those 10 entered and ate their fill. Again he said, let 10 more enter upon me. Those 10 entered and ate their fill. Then he said, let 10 more enter upon me. He called 40 persons in all. Then Allah's Messenger ate and got up. I started looking at the food to see if it decreased or not. Chapter 49. The eating of garlic or other bad-smelling vegetables. Narrated Abdul Aziz. It was said to Anas, what did you hear the Prophet saying about garlic? Anas replied, whoever has eaten garlic should not approach our mosque. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah. The Prophet said, whoever has eaten garlic or onion should keep away from us, or should keep away from our mosque. Chapter 50. Al-Qabat, the leaves of Al-Arak. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah. We were with Allah's Messenger collecting Al-Qabat at Mar as-Saran. The Prophet said, collect the black ones, for they are better. Somebody said, O Allah's Messenger, have you ever shepherded sheep? He said, there has been no prophet but has shepherded them. Chapter 51. To rinse the mouth after taking meals. Narrated Suwaid bin al-Numan. We went out with Allah's Messenger to Khaybar, and when we reached As-Saba, the Prophet asked for food, and he was offered nothing but savik. We ate, and then Allah's Messenger stood up for the prayer. He rinsed his mouth with water, and we too rinsed our mouths. Narrated Suwaid. We went out with Allah's Messenger to Khaybar, and when we reached As-Saba, which Yahya says is 1 day journey from Khaybar, the Prophet asked for food, and he was offered nothing but savik, which we chewed and ate. Then the Prophet asked for water and rinsed his mouth, and we too rinsed our mouths along with him. He then led us in the Maghrib prayer without performing ablution again. Chapter 52. To lick and suck the fingers. Narrated Ibn Abbas. The Prophet said, when you eat, do not wipe your hands till you have licked it, or had it licked by somebody else. Chapter 53. The handkerchief. Narrated Sa'id bin al-Harith, that he asked Jabir bin Abdullah about performing ablution after taking a cooked meal. He replied, it is not essential, and added, we never used to get such kind of food during the lifetime of the Prophet, except rarely, and if at all we got such a dish, we did not have any handkerchiefs to wipe our hands with except the palms of our hands, our forearms and our feet. We would perform the prayer thereafter without performing new ablution. Chapter 54. what one should say after finishing one's meal. Narrated Abu Umama. Whenever the dining sheet of the Prophet was taken away, whenever he finished his meal, he used to say, Alhamdulillah Katiran Tayyiban Mubarakan Fihi Gaira Makifi Wala Muwada Wala Mustagna Nahu Rabuna. Narrated Abu Umama. Whenever the Prophet finished his meals, or when his dining sheet was taken away, he used to say, Praise be to Allah, who has satisfied our needs and quenched our thirst. Your favor cannot be compensated or denied. Once he said, Upraise be to you, O our Lord. Your favor cannot be compensated, nor can be left, nor can be dispensed with, O our Lord. Chapter 55. To eat with one's servant. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, When your servant brings your food to you, if you do not ask him to join you, then at least ask him to take 1 or 2 handfuls, for he has suffered from its heat while cooking it, and has taken pains to cook it nicely. Chapter 56. A person who thanks Allah after taking his meals. Chapter 57. May this person come with me too. Narrated Abu Masud al-Ansari. There was an Ansari man nicknamed Abu Shu'aib, who had a slave who was a butcher. He came to the Prophet while he was sitting with his companions and noticed the signs of hunger on the face of the Prophet. So he went to his butcher slave and said, Prepare for me a meal sufficient for 5 persons, so that I may invite the Prophet along with 4 other men. He had the meal prepared for him and invited him. A 6th man followed them. The Prophet said, O Abu Shu'aib, another man has followed us. If you wish, you may invite him, and if you wish, you may refuse him. Abu Shu'aib said, No, I will admit him. Chapter 58. If supper or dinner is served when the time for Salat is due. Narrated Amr bin Umayyah that he saw Allah's Messenger cutting a piece of mutton from its shoulder part. He was carrying in his hand. When he was called for prayer, he put it down and the knife with which he was cutting it. Then he stood up and offered a prayer without performing new ablution. Narrated Anas bin Malik. The Prophet said, If supper is served and the Iqama for Isha prayer is proclaimed, start with your supper first. Narrated Nafi. Once Ibn Umar was taking his supper while he was listening to the recitation of Quran by the Imam in the Isha prayer. Narrated Aisha. The Prophet said, If the Iqama for Isha prayer is proclaimed and supper is served, take your supper first. Chapter 59. And when you have taken your meal, disperse. Narrated Anas. I know about the hijab, the order of veiling of women, more than anybody else. Ubay bin Ka'b used to ask me about it. Allah's Messenger became the bridegroom of Zainab bint Jahsh, whom he married at Medina. After the sun had risen high in the sky, the Prophet invited the people to a meal. Allah's Apostle remained sitting, and some people remained sitting with him. After the other guests had left, then Allah's Messenger got up and went away, and I too followed him, till he reached the door of Aisha's room. Then he thought that the people must have left the place by then, so he returned, and I also returned with him. Behold, the people were still sitting at their places. So he went back again for the second time, and I went along with him too. When we reached the door of Aisha's room, he returned, and I also returned with him, to see that the people had left. Thereupon the Prophet hung a curtain between me and him, and the verse regarding the order for veiling of women, hijab, was revealed.